Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Deepti Ravi Shankar, and I'd like to welcome you all to this event titled Compliance, a catalyst for the growth of the pharma sector, hosted by Legacy Services Private Limited. We aim to spread awareness about compliance, not just as a mandated requirement, but also something that is driven by human values and ethics, and that can increase value for all stakeholders. I would now like to invite our CEO and Director, Mr. Jaideep Keval Ramani, to take the helm and welcome everybody.
A very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We have an exciting lineup of panelists for you. I believe we are starting with a couple of opening comments from evangelists. So I'll turn this over to Deepti to introduce the evangelists and we'll hear from them. Deepti, once again, thank you so much and welcome everyone.
Thank you so much. So now I'd like to introduce our interviewers. We all have on as our interviewers Mr. B.V. Suresh, who is President of External Relations at Cadila Pharmaceuticals. Having been with them for over 2 decades, he has built the compliance program from its infancy to the role model that it is today for the industry. With his deep understanding about what should drive a company and its people, not just the extrinsic values, but also the intrinsic, and also what are the potential challenges that one could face, and also, of course, best practices. I'm pretty sure that is what everybody wants to know. We also have with us Mr. Irfan Ahmed, who is a global compliance leader with over 25 years of experience. And he has an extremely unique perspective, as he has served both from the point of the industry that we are in and from the side of the government authorities. Therefore, the insight that he has into the field is invaluable learning for all those who wish to have a proactive compliance program.
The disruption which we are seeing is kind of very interesting. So we live in a world that is changing at a breakneck speed. The disruption is the new normal. And, against this backdrop, businesses today are operating in a highly complicated, complex, and, kind of very challenging regulatory environment, if I have to say. So this, kind of against this backdrop, compliance has come to play a very important role, in our, kind of organization, in our lives, the way things are changing, the disruptions are, the way things are being redefined in such a, kind of dynamic, kind of environment. We need to kind of redefine our values, ethics, the society we are living in, and all of that. So just to give you a backdrop on this piece, I think that's pretty interesting. And compliance is becoming very, very important as I see it, and rightly so. So it's very important that, the sector we are in, making accessible the essential medicines to the world at large, and being in this kind of sensitive setup, it's very important that all the kind of regulatory standards or the quality kind of standards of whatever we are manufacturing is met. Those standards are kind of benchmark. So from that perspective, it's very important that we kind of take compliance very seriously, and that's what's happening. And then in terms of the global changes that we see, increased enforcement is a big focus area. Cross-border cooperation among regulators is happening on a very, very kind of dynamic scale. We are in a world where we are very much connected, all across with all the kind of regulators looking at us. So it's very important that we have the same compliance standards and those benchmark practices which is there. So that's the one backdrop. If you talk about the regulatory piece, other is our inner commitment. So every company is talking about the compliance equity in the system. The investors are talking about it big time. The management and the board, everybody is kind of, we want to be on the right side, and that sense of commitment is kind of is very much there. and that's kind of is bringing this compliance onto the central stage, especially in the sector which I'm working in at present.
Right.
Yeah, whether it is the ESG compliance, the environment, the social investing, or the whole governance piece, or the statutory piece, or ethics piece, all of these are kind of becoming important day by day.
Compliance is not just restricted to compliance of statutory acts and statutes, both central and state, as we know, which, yes, directly is under my purview and my team's responsibility. But, in pharmaceutical, the compliance is a very matrixed kind of an organization. Compliance management is a very matrixed organization. It also encompasses quality assurance and regulatory affairs. When I say regulatory affairs, these are all regulatory affairs, the responsibilities of the regulatory affairs team, which is also a subset of the compliance team, is to ensure the compliance of regulatory framework or environment in the countries that we operate. Yeah, and the quality side of it, the quality assurance team, which also is a subset of the compliance management in a pharma organization. They are responsible for the CGMP, the current global manufacturing practice, current global laboratory practices, and assure the quality and efficacy of the products. So there are a lot of regulatory frameworks that come to play with regard to developments, innovations, product delivery, commercialization. So those are also come within the gambit of compliance management.
Exactly, that's where I was coming from. That not only just to meet the regulatory standards, we do things, but it has to be intrinsic, and that helps the cause. If we are in for the long-term game, any company, and I can name the best in the world, where we build this equity, and it's a kind of journey we take over a period of time, and then it gets into the ingrained in the DNA of each and every employee, the leadership, the board, the management, and all that. So that's a beautiful ROI we create, the return on investment. So today compliance is being seen as I just mentioned, as a kind of we build that equity in the system, and it is seen as a very, very important component of the governance. Whether we go, like you just mentioned, whether we kind of go to the government for any of those regulatory approvals, it's very important that the way they see the company, the holistic piece, in terms of the governance, it becomes very important. You talk about the SEBI, you talk about the SEC, you talk about the US FDA or any of these regulators, and it's like the whole set of processes you create in the system, and it is not just the role of the compliance professional. Of late, I have realized, that it is, all of us needs to own compliance. And that's the, kind of mission we, try to build in the organization. If it has to sustain, for long, and if it has to build or take that, ethical journey. Because, that's where it's not, some kind of just putting things together just for, kind of the government piece or any of the investors and all that. But it is, kind of so natural, and it has that, kind of flow where, each and every employee, owns compliance. He, kind of is the brand ambassador and compliance champion, in his own. He or she is a compliance officers, in their own capability. And there, all of us are, kind of working together to build that, equity in the system. I see the role of compliance that way.
And see, the whole definition of compliance has changed.
Yes.
Compliance is to be more proactive than just reactive to an enforcement problem. In the past, we used to see it as an enforcement problem. There will be some kind of a show cause or a notice, or in pharma, what we call the 483 warning letters. 483 warning letters they come from the US FDA or FDAs of a similar kind
Right.
of notices comes from warning letters come from the various FDAs and regulatory agencies of various
Right.
countries. They say, what does letters talk about? They talk about deviations from SOPs and things like that,
Mhm.
or the regulatory framework. So, so it is not just a reactive kind of issue, compliance. It is a more a proactive issue,
So, as I mentioned, there are two parts to it, Deepti. One is in terms of building the right competence in the function, having the right capability building, which is like, the compliance professional needs to understand that, they have to adopt and adapt to the, changing situations. So, if there is a disruption, and which is, there, as I mentioned earlier, the changing regulatory landscape, or, kind of this whole increased enforcement and all that. So they have to be on top of it and be ready to embrace any of these, new things. That is one. Second is, technology will be very, very important. So first, as I mentioned, you need to be having the right mindset to, kind of learn, unlearn, and relearn. I think that's very important. Having the right mindset. Second is in terms of adopting and adaptation to these, technologies, because now you see any pharma company or any company, I would like to, take it, especially in the wake of, COVID situation, we are becoming more and more IT, companies with, all digital enablement for all our operations, whether it is the supply chain or production, or, kind of connecting with our business partners and so on and so forth. So, having the right processes in compliance is very important. So one is in terms of having the right expertise, capability building. Second is in terms of technology. So if I talk about, the companies where I've worked, or, kind of we are building on, compliance framework and governance, we have a lot of, technology interface in that. So most of the processes, whether it is the third-party risk management, vendor onboarding, or our training and communication, or, our risk management, kind of matrix, or putting it across to the board with respect to our response and remediation, oversight monitoring, compliance audit, whatever you take, it's kind of 90% of the processes are digitized, and that makes it easy. So, when this thing hit, we didn't have too much of a problem in kind of implementing our compliance program, or, kind of facilitating whatever, kind of KPIs or KRAs we had in terms of, our deliverables. So it's very, very important on that front. And lastly, having the right governance framework, where, you have this, kind of multi-level councils, compliance councils, having representation from all across, whether it is your business leaders, or, kind of other partners and all that. So you take all those decisions, together, and that's how that ownership of compliance comes in. Unless we, kind of build those things, I think it becomes very difficult to have the right compliance equity in the system.
Especially in these times, pandemic times, more so in this pandemic time, compliance has taken a center stage, or is the priority for any organization in the pharma sector. Because it's I would say unfortunate, because because of the pandemic, pharma companies suddenly see a lot of growth. You'll see how the pharma stocks on the stock markets are reacting. They're all growing leaps and bounds. So in this phase of unstoppable expansion in the industry, the need for strong compliance management becomes all the more indispensable. It's very important. Regulatory changes are having material impact on business innovations. Pharmaceutical companies operate in one of the most dynamic environment imaginable. It is very dynamic. Every country are calibrating their regulatory framework, and if we are to operate in those markets, we are a global company, and so we have to operate in those markets. We have to also be sensitive and very careful in in following the regulatory framework of each of the countries we operate in. So it has become a very complex environment for pharma companies. And customer expectations are changing. There are
Yes.
new drugs, new vaccines, new drugs, and markets are being disrupted. A vaccine usually takes 8 to 10 years to actually commercialize.
Huh.
From development to commercialization, it should take 8 to 10 years. Now you see in 1 year's time, we were forced to deliver a vaccine. And then at the same time, companies are struggling, to drive a rapid pace of innovation without compromising their regulatory integrity, because obviously, we all, and Cadila is no exception, ethics is topmost priority for us. Yeah. So to keep the regulatory integrity, these are both the mandates are at odds, today. One, we have to drive the innovation at a very fast pace. At the same time, we can't do shortcuts. There is no shortcuts in pharma drug development, because we have to comply with regulatory, the regulatory framework that come to
Yes.
play in the development of drugs. So these are two mandates in these times, especially, are really at odds. And then regulatory agencies like US FDA, European Medicine Agencies, and other regulatory, they are constantly reacting to the changes that is happening
Right.
due to this pandemic, and they're constantly changing the regulatory frameworks of their countries, respective countries.
Right.
So obviously, the safety and efficacy is the highest priority in their minds, as regulatory agencies. So it has become for pharma companies a very expensive proposition also, and they're constrained in their efforts, frankly, to bring innovations to the market. And it's a very, what should I say, a long and exhaustive process. Every stage there is compliance requirements. From the start to finish, from development to scale up to actually putting products in the market, has a whole lot of we have to traverse through a whole lot of regulatory requirements. So it's a very long and exhaustive process.
Yes.
And not only it is time consuming, but it is also expensive.
Compliance is a journey. Building the right ethics and value system in the organization, it takes kind of years to kind of build that culture, and it pays. Today, if you talk about good companies, and I don't want to take any name, including the company where I have worked, but you go to the regulators and they treat you differently. They know that you are bringing in that kind of brand, that compliance brand with you. You have a kind of wonderful speak up culture, a wonderful vigil mechanism where you encourage people to speak without fear of retaliation, and all those things just go by word of mouth. They just get spread. So when some US FDA team or any kind of quality regulators are coming in, it is just not the quality piece they are seeing. They are seeing the whole ethics piece of it when they are interacting with the employees, and they understand the honest intention of the people. So that's one piece. Similarly on the statutory piece, you go to any of these kind of government agencies and all that, your brand goes but before that, what you're talking about. Then you talk about investors' confidence. That's one very, very important kind of measurable metrics, and I've seen in recent kind of interactions with many of these kind of board meetings or investors meet and other stuff. I've been kind of indirectly part of it, or I just hear from various sources. It's becoming very, very important that they want to have that confidence in terms of the right governance, the right kind of ethical values which just the company is bringing to the table, and that's a whole lot of things. And the other piece, when you are interacting with business partners of repute, the best benchmarks, kind of companies of the world who wants to do business with you, they, kind of come very willingly, knowing fully well that you have a very well established, code of conduct, the policies, the governance framework, your, risk management approach, and your whistleblower mechanism and all of that. So, they are, much more than willing, to become your partner in kind of spreading the business and kind of taking it forward and taking it to the next level. Then last piece is, any global company having their operations in multiple geographies, 20, 25, 30 geographies. Some of them are, high risky geographies from a corruption perception index and all that, the emerging market piece, whether we talk of APEC MENA or China or Russia CIS countries or any of these things. So then when you get in there and you are interacting with the local folks, the expectations are set right from the beginning. So, kind of you are able to kind of mitigate the exposure right from the word go. And, if we have to kind of talk about recent FCPA enforcement across the pharma setup, we have seen, companies, big companies, reputed companies, faltering just one or two slippage here and there, and they are into big trouble. So years of, kind of hard labor and, culture building and those revenues and other stuff just goes in a whip, the amount of penalties, we have to see those, kind of quantums and recent enforcement in this, kind of a space to understand, what compliance, brings in and what is the cost of non-compliance.
The idea should be to adhere to the requirements of the FDA and the other agencies and federal and state agencies, as well as find ways to build a culture that fosters compliance among employees. See, it has to become in Cadila, it has definitely become, because the tone from the top is that there's zero tolerance for non-compliance. So, so it has become a way of life, but it has to be in pharma, specifically in pharma, because this is a noble activity, you're producing medicines to elevate diseases, So, the employees, there has to be this culture of compliance, because any non-compliance will result in a poor product or a wrong product or a dangerous product.
And if I add to just one more, to it, is, in terms of the management's commitment, tone at the top is very, very important. So, whether as a management or as a company, we stand for that, because if it is not there, as I said, no matter whatever you do, it is just a kind of tick the box, or it just becomes a paper compliance, which we don't want. So it has to be from within. When I talk about that, ethics in business is much more than following the rules. It's leading by example, setting the tone at the top, having the courage to take difficult decisions, demonstrating the right value, and creating the right culture in the organization. It's about honesty, integrity, and accountability. So that kind of sense of commitment, and compliance leaders have to do those, walk the talk kind of thing, and they have to kind of show it by example, whether it's their personal integrity or this is very important. I've seen, many of the times when, business leaders, they see the intent is right, even if it is too overwhelming for them, at least they understand that the intent is right and we want to do things the right way.
Okay, we will now move towards our panel discussion, which will be moderated by our CEO and Director, Mr. Keval Ramani. I would like to introduce our panelists. We have with us Mr. Sandeep Rathod, who is the General Counsel and Vice President Legal at JB Chemicals and Pharmaceuticals Limited. He carries a strong experience in the pharmaceutical and regulatory FCMG legislation, patents, and inbound product technology licensing, acquisitions, policy analysis, and focusing on developing relationships with government officials and major policy makers. He is also the author of several published papers and presentations in his field, as well as the contributor of the India chapter for Thomson's International Contract Manual 2019. I'd like to welcome you, sir, and thank you so much for being here today. I would also like to introduce Mr. Suraj Singh, who is the Head of Legal at Novartis Healthcare Private Limited. He carries an experience of over 20 years in heading the legal departments of large MNCs in pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, and the ITES industry. He has also been a member of senior leadership teams, providing strategic legal advice on various regulatory compliances, employment, litigation, and other legal issues. And last, but definitely not the least, he has also been listed as one of India's finest in-house counsels by the Indian Corporate Counsel Association, ICCA, in 2016, and as part of the elite BW Legal World Top 100 General Counsels of India by Business World 2020. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Deepti. That was very generous introduction.
I hope I have done both of you justice. I would like to hand over to Mr. Keval Ramani now. Sir?
Dipti, thank you so much. Suraj, Sandeep, once again, welcome and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. After a very nice opening message by B.V. Suresh of Cadila and Irfan, I must actually mention that we seem to have a mini reunion here. A lot of you, and in fact, panelists who could not join us, seem to be from Mylan, or you'll have at some point of time worked with Mylan together. So welcome to a mini reunion, the Boys Club of Mylan. I mean, we all know that the pharmaceutical sector is one of the highly regulated sectors, if not after BFSI, at least equal with BFSI. There are a huge number of compliances that the businesses have to deal with. Quite often, people view compliances as a burden on the business. But on the contrary, I believe that compliances, if dealt with properly, actually can help accelerate the growth of the business, the credibility of the business, and develop the overall stakeholder gains, whether it is for the third parties you're working with, or your staff, or the clients, or your investors. At this point, I'd like to invite opening comments from you, Sandeep, and then we'll move on to you, Suraj. Sandeep, your opening comments on compliances and the pharmaceutical industry.
Good afternoon, Jaideep and the participants. I must admit at the start that this would have become a bigger Mylan Viatris get-together if we had our third friend Irfan also on the phone or on the conference call here. So Suraj and Irfan go a long way back, and in fact, Suraj will be the right person to tell you a lot more on how compliance reels in, and how Irfan also can give the right comments. I have been more on the other side of things, that is what happens when compliance goes wrong, in a sense. Because my background was in litigation earlier. So coming back to the opening comments, as we see the newer focus, or rather the refocus of investment companies on Indian companies, ESG related for buzzwords have come into the investment thesis that is there on the table today. And if you see the last 1.5 year, where we see 1,000 crore plus deals happening in the pharma space, both on API and contract manufacturing space, almost every month, you will realize that ESG related statements have to come in the picture. And if the company is going to stand out in the market on its own feet, then compliances will become the foundation upon which you can build an ESG thesis. So that is the investor related focus that I have. But I think generally, if to use a very cliched and overused joke, if you think compliance is expensive, try doing it the wrong way. And we faced our share of problems with that in the various companies as well.
Thanks, Sandeep. If I go next.
Yes, Suraj, please.
Yeah, it is definitely like a reunion. I keep talking to Sandeep and Irfan. Actually, I keep consulting them on various aspects. But it's really nice to be on the same panel. And I was really happy when I saw the names of Sandeep and Irfan, actually. But anyway, let me take that, the thought which Sandeep was talking about. He touched upon ESG. And I will maybe open with more generic way. I feel that, one of the greatest assets any company has is its reputation. And once it is damaged, it becomes very difficult to repair. And I have personally seen in the past in various companies that, the moment anything affects the reputation, it becomes so difficult. There could be legal disputes, there could be, any other issues that we can actually address. But reputation is something which is not tangible, but it is very important. And I think it is more important for a pharma company than any other company, because we are in the business of life-saving drugs. We actually want to extend or improve the lives of the patients, and reputation becomes very important. And I think we have already been hit by lack of reputation. Generally there is this bad perception of pharma companies, which I would say is kind of improving in the recent past thanks to COVID. But I definitely want to open with this statement that reputation is the greatest asset for a pharma company.
Suraj, thank you. And Sandeep, thank you for those opening comments. I think since we are still in the late stages of COVID, and God knows whether we'll see the third wave, hopefully we don't, you're true that the overall perception of pharma companies has improved, and the rate at which the companies have kind of reacted, not just necessarily for COVID medication, there was a whole range of other supporting medication and industry that kind of came up to support. So a big thank you to the entire pharma industry for stepping up to this challenge and meeting the need of the hour. While reputation and the cost of non-compliance are both key factors to focus on, Suraj and Sandeep, let me ask a question. What are the top three compliance-related challenges that kind of bog you down? I mean, there is a lot spoken about this subject. Some organizations suffer with the lack of management intent. Some suffer with the lack of using the right technology. Some suffer with the lack of getting the real-time updates. And of course, there are many other layers to it. We'll touch upon integrated compliances and third-party compliances as we move along. But broadly, what do you think would be the top three challenges? Let's start with Suraj first.
Sure. I think, some of these aspects have been covered by, by Irfan and other panel speakers. And I think, they did talk about, tone from the top and the kind of, issues that we need to address. But if you ask me exactly what are the challenges, I would say one of them is, the kind of contractors or third party or vendors that you engage, and any kind of a non-compliance by these, third parties could actually affect, us. Very often I have seen that, I get hit not because I have done something wrong, but because, the contractor that I have engaged has not complied with certain requirements. This is one of the greatest challenges, and also an opportunity for us to improve is, be very selective, or, understand what kind of a vendor or, the third party with whom you are engaging. The second challenge, or, maybe an aspect that we need to keep in mind is, the kind of culture that, we see. The tone from the top is one aspect we have seen. But, I think I would say that entire company, especially the top management, middle management, and everybody in the company need to have that culture of compliance. Compliance cannot be treated as some kind of a cost center. And if you do treat it, like some kind of a, expense that you need to actually do, then I think that could become another big challenge for us. And the third challenge I would say, Jaideep, is, the kind of regulatory environment where, the Indian companies live. I'm not really talking about corruption, but even, the kind of laws that we have are sometimes very archaic. I was actually, recently looking into Schedule M, of the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, which talks about the good manufacturing practices. And I was surprised to know that, the GMP that we have in India is more stringent than what US FDA and other regulators have. There are some aspects and which I'm actually facing a challenge, in meeting with these kind of regulatory requirements. when you have these kind of a very stringent, regulatory requirements, then it becomes challenging for many companies to actually meet with these kind of requirements. So, these are some challenges that I foresee with respect to, doing business, especially pharma business in India.
Suresh, thank you. That actually leads us to a few more questions. But before we delve into that, let me hear Sandeep's take on the top challenges from a compliance perspective for pharmaceutical industry. Sandeep? You're on mute, Sandeep.
Sorry. So, Jaideep, Suraj has rightly picked up one major problem. I would partially use the word partially unsolvable problem, that is third-party contractor-related compliance problems. But let me then try to pick up the other thread. I think for a large number of companies, even internal compliance at times is a problem. And this problem is a culmination of what Suraj rightly hinted at as complicated or confusing laws. Plus, let me be honest here and also say, put the elephant back in the room, that there is a concern with the way we Indians approach discipline per se. Nobody, the IPA or the other industry lobbies would always try to maintain a very goody-goody image, but I think here all of us are from the industry and we can afford to be frank. Let's accept the fact that as a culture, when we do not respect traffic lights, the compliance problems start from there. And then expecting that same kind of our colleagues, including me, to then come into our factory premises, our corporate premises, and maintain the highest levels of compliance, which, as Suraj hinted, that our Schedule M, if completely implemented in spirit and letter, would become much more stringent than US FDA related requirements. So then the chasm that we are expecting me, my colleagues, and our workforce, and your colleagues and your workforce to bridge on the road at the traffic signal into the factory floor is a very huge chasm. There is a lot of things said about training, etc., but I think we need a culture shift. What has happened in the last few years is that because of stringent actions, we know clinical trial related problems with one of the Hyderabad clinical service providers. We know of 483 related problems with almost every major pharma company. So there's no point in taking names. So, but in any of these instances, had the management ever publicly said that we want to take the shortcut? No, that was never said. In fact, it could be said that the managements were keen on putting up infrastructure in place, spending money and bringing in resources. But then still there have been problems. So what does it come down to? It comes down to either shortcuts being taken at middle management and lower management levels or at shop floor levels, or there is a gap between what we talk and how we walk. We need to, as an industry, accept and not just sit in industry forums and say that everything is hunky-dory.
Sandeep, thank you so much for placing the heavy subject on the table. Let's build on this. I think you are right. There could be a deep cultural issue that kind of prevents us. There is always the sense of anti-establishment. I mean, if that is said, then we necessarily do not want to follow that and we want to do something else. But when met with business repercussion or reputation risks or fine, then businesses tend to fall in line. However, I think there is a bright side to this. With growing globalization, increased stakeholder awareness, activism, and also a general high level of consciousness amongst the staff. We have a lot of new age staff kind of coming in who carry maybe a little different culture than what the older staff carries. Do you see that we are going through a stage of transformation, or do you still believe we are stuck in the cultural issues and it'll take a lot of effort to break through?
You want me to approach that first?
Sure.
Yeah. So I genuinely do not think that we have enough new age stuff coming in. Let's go back to what we still teach in our N-Pharma courses. or our B Pharma courses or diploma pharmacy courses, who become the, the foundational backbone for our workforce in that sense, on the technical side, apart from the pure factory workers. I do not think that we put enough emphasis on a cultural shift there. And that is going to remain a problem. Yes, on a top level, we see a very huge amount of resource and time being spent on new software, cultural training, software on checking data changes, etc. Everything is being done. But I still think that, again, putting an uncomfortable subject on the table, those kinds of resources and infrastructures are being spent for factories which are only meant for export. If we really want to talk about compliance as an inherent part of our industry, let's be honest and frank and ask, what kind of plants do we use for products being sold in the domestic market? We can all say that, my US FDA approved plant has the highest compliances, and that is a true fact. Every company today, from the top 30 pharma Indian companies, which has its own US FDA approved plant, is spending an exceptional amount of time and resource to cross the dots, cross the T's, I's, put up everything: software, laboratory management software, electronic batch management record software, everything for the exports market. How many Indian companies are doing that for the products that they sell in the Indian market? You can again point out the chicken and egg situation, that if they kind of put those resources for Indian factories, then the costs will increase, etc., etc. But again, this is a culture issue, and I want these things to be spoken of in the public. Let's not talk of saying that my US wala plant is having exceptional cleanliness and exceptional HEPA filters and everything, and wahan pe hamara laboratory management software और 50 चीजें हैं. Let's also start asking, what do we as an industry give to our fellow citizens?
Yes, Jaideep. These are very interesting, points from Sandeep. But, I kind of respectfully differ from him to some extent, but, also agree, especially this aspect of what Sandeep was hinting at is, that kind of a difference, for India market, you manufacture with the kind of quality, with the kind of, plants. But when it comes to the exports, you have this, completely plush manufacturing facility. You comply with every, T's, and you cross everything there, very compliant process. In fact, I have seen many multinationals, when they manufacture in India, in-house manufacture, it is only for export markets. But if they want to market or, supply products in India market, they actually go to an Indian contract manufacturer and then, market those products. You can see that clear difference. When it comes to an export market, you adhere to all the quality norms. But when it comes to a domestic market, I don't know why, you actually go to, the Indian manufacturers or a small time contract manufacturers. The second aspect, which Sandeep was talking about is the, whether the new age staff or, employees is bringing any kind of a change. I kind of see that happening, to some extent. I got into this market almost like 20, 21 years back. And I see a little bit of change. Could be because of, maybe my experience is unique on this, but, a lot of companies are kind of realizing the importance of compliance, the kind of pitfalls and the way you can get badly hit, not just in India, but internationally. And the kind of fines that you actually get to, pay is huge, which can actually, turn your tables on your, the entire profits. Things like, speak up culture. I have seen this actually work in some instances. There are people in the labs who were, because of that kind of a psychological safety and speak up culture, they have come across quite openly and said that, something was wrong in their experiment or something is wrong. Maybe 10 years back, they would not have actually come up with that kind of a, finding. But I see people coming up. It could be because of that kind of a psychological safety that is being provided by some companies. But I do see some improvement, Jaideep, just to answer your question. There seems to be some perceptible difference, some improvement in the general atmosphere to comply with the required laws and SOPs and guidances.
Excellent, Suraj and Sandeep. Thank you. Let's shift gears a little bit. So let's first talk about integrated compliances. There are a lot of compliances, right from front end to manufacturing to lab related and all of that. And while we talk about how do you integrate all compliances together, it'll also be great to hear your perspective on how to approach this. Should we have a risk-based approach to managing compliances? Should we carry a monetary damage perspective on managing compliances? What should be the primary approach? Your views, please, Suraj.
Yeah, I think I will, continue the same thought as such. When you talk about the culture, I do see this kind of changes that are happening, Jaideep. And there are companies which I have seen which start every leadership meeting with first topic being a compliance topic. One of the first topics they start with is what kind of vulnerabilities they have. This is what actually may help at least, cascade this kind of a message down the level in the organization. And when I'm talking about the internal compliances, having this kind of a tone at the top and in the middle, having this kind of speak up culture, providing this kind of psychological safety. And there was a time where I do remember that even your performance evaluation at the end of the year was actually based on your adherence to various compliance parameters. Most of the employees, were given an objective, and almost like 25% weightage was given, whether you have met that compliance objective or not. If you can actually embed this kind of a culture across the organization, I think it may help. And I have seen, as I said in the past, it does kind of, improve your overall compliance culture.
Thank you so much, Suraj. Sandeep, your views on integrated compliances, and maybe you can build on the culture aspect of it as well.
So let's first take the culture bit. I definitely think that a cultural shift needs to be brought in only from the top. And because of how we have our general culture outside in the cities and our towns, the cultural shift has to be constantly repeated so that the workforce and the colleagues feel and realize that this is not just verbiage being spoken of in an open session, but that the organization is actually genuinely committed. So where Suraj pointed out, that every meeting starting with, I think that bit can help, that you constantly drill down that as an organization, we are committed to compliance, not because of some external force, but because, or risk, but we genuinely believe that the right way is the only way to do things. And I can see Suraj and me remembering our previous organizations with the right way words and all that. But the fact remains that yes, a large number of repeats would be required for people to realize that management and promoters are genuinely talking of real and consistent cultural change, that this is not a one season thing that, okay, we'll do a cultural week, 1 week in the entire year and it's done and dusted. So that part is one thing. Secondly, as the head of a function who comes in when the proverbial manure hits the fan, I think a risk-based approach is probably the way to start things at our table, that, okay, as the legal service providers for the organization, how do we look at things and start creating a risk matrix and then integrate that with how the organization sees overall compliance culture. So for example, for me or Suraj, what would be more critical is, okay, how are the pollution related risks open today? What are being taken care of? right? Similarly, both for example, at least me, I have a front-end risk of marketing compliances. So because we as an organization have a very large part of our sales coming from the domestic market. So what could be the kind of risks today? And the risks are not just pure illegal activities, but the risks also emanate from policy shifts. So for example, today UCPMP for me is a policy issue. It's not in that sense a law issue. But the day UCPMP gets transformed into an actual law, or it gets integrated into, say, as a schedule to the Drugs and Cosmetics Act or the Magic Remedies Act or whatever, one of the two, then for me, the front-end compliances today, which I theoretically had some level of flexibility to manage, will suddenly become an immediate requirement. So while we have one set of compliances for plant-related sites, pollution, worker compliances, all those things coming under the Factories Act, etc., crashes and all, those can be already built in because of guidelines and because of service providers like Legacies, etc. But increasingly every day, the risk that comes to us is how do policies change? Let's take an analogous example on what happened in the devices case in the last month at the NPPA level, right? These devices suddenly came inside the NPPA because there was absurd pricing going on in the market. And if you are the head of the legal function for a devices company in that sense, how do you suddenly transform and stand up to the management that, okay, these are the changes? They may understand the changes. You can, as a legal head, tell them that, okay, price needs to be changed. They'll understand that. But how do you bring in a system that takes care of such exigencies overnight or over a very short period of time? How do you give the confidence to the management that, okay, what we are doing will also be done by our people at the distributor level or at the retailer level? That's another nightmare for companies selling in the Indian market. I can do everything right with the NPPA related formalities. And then I realized that there's some retailer somewhere in Chandigarh, Amritsar, Pune, Hyderabad, whatever. He's still not selling at the reduced prices that I have publicly advertised in the media. And then the nice, sweet drugs inspector from somewhere in Vijayanagaram will issue a summons against me, and then we have a criminal case very shortly. So those kinds of nightmares are a reality for us on a weekly basis. Policy changes and policy change-based legal implementation.
Absolutely. And given the VUCA world that we are living in, these changes are happening literally on a dynamic basis, and the management of it also has to be real time. I guess that's a subject for a complete different discussion and an in-depth discussion altogether. How do you handle the VUCA environment in the pharma compliances and see that which you need to change? But before we run out of time, I wanted to touch upon a very important subject, which is third-party compliances. It came up during our opening comments as well. We all live in a very, very tightly integrated supply chain. And as you kind of lead your manufacturing operations and distribution operations, there is a partner network that kind of backs you up for pretty much all critical components. And now the supply chains have become so tight that you lean on them very heavily. And therefore, the compliances you are subject to have a spillover on them as well. They, of course, are subject to their own compliances, but they have to adhere to certain standards that you are subject to. How do you monitor third-party compliances? Number one, do you take care of it as a one-time onboarding activity, or do you do ongoing compliance monitoring? Please, if you could share some inputs about your approach or practical tips on how to handle third-party compliances, that will be interesting for the audience and your peers in the industry. Suraj, would you like to go first?
Sure, thanks, Jaideep. Yeah, and I think, this is something which I touched upon at the beginning. You sometimes get hit, not because you're not compliant, but because, your contractor has not been compliant. What would I do to, ensure that, the third parties are compliant? One is, which you touched upon, onboarding. I think, doing a proper due diligence of a third party before you actually onboard would help a lot. I mean, if I can talk from my own company's perspective, we have a very elaborate, third-party due diligence that we do. It takes care of their financial due diligence, their legal due diligence, their anti-bribery due diligence. We kind of cover every aspect, and then, only then we actually onboard. Then, during the onboarding itself, we try to enter into an appropriate contract, which, in a way binds them to continue to be compliant, also to indemnify us in case there is any breach. And the third aspect is it has to be a continuous kind of a monitoring. I don't think we can just let things rest after onboarding. We will have to conduct audits. In fact, we reserve that right in our contract itself, that we can onboard. And what we have done in the recent past also, Jaideep, is that we have started, especially with certain labor, contractors, every quarter audit. It's basically, that these contractors will submit all their evidences of compliances. This is done on a ongoing basis, on a quarterly basis, so that, we are on top as to, whether they are being compliant or not. With respect to the labor contractors, I think, we get hit directly because, we are treated as a principal employer. And in case of any breach, we are directly get affected. In fact, the labor inspector or any other, authority would directly come and give us the notice rather than going to the actual contractor, because he knows, where he can actually, get some response. I can give you an example from my previous company. There was, an inspection done. There was a case where he came and said that overtime wages were not paid to the security guards of, a contractor. And he calculated on that basis, he basically looked into that, incoming and outgoing timings of all these people. He took records from my own company, and he basically came up with a fine of more than 1 crore, saying that, so many people have not been paid overtime wages. And it took such a long time for us to actually, come out of that non-compliance. We had to chase all the contractors, all these security agencies and get these records. Another example, there has been, which Sandeep also was talking about, clinical trials and any kind of, misconduct or any non-compliance there. It may not be directly affecting me, but if I'm actually contracting with another, site, doing a clinical trial and I'm a sponsor, if any non-compliance happens there, DCGI is going to go against me because I'm a sponsor, though the clinical trial is done in another site altogether. So, we have to monitor it continuously. I think that's the only mantra for us to, stay afloat. Sorry, I've taken a long time, but, over to you, Sandeep.
So, Suraj, see, what you said rightly, it covers a very large part that companies will have to spend time and resources on creating a framework where third-party compliances becomes a part of your annual structure. You may, as a company, look at some kind of risk-based approach that, okay, for my top 10 suppliers, I start immediately, and for them, they'll have every 6 months some kind of a survey, check, etc. And then the next 20 will have it every 2 years or something. But I think on a thought level, this is not something that is very, very, I would say, impractical for a pharma company to understand. Pharma managements have been aware of bringing, for example, I'll take a technical example here, Jaideep, that pharma companies have been aware of how to bring in a simple thing like a second source API, right? So while today, yes, we lean on particular first source API companies, for example, very heavily, but then the thought process will be the same, that we will have to create more and more redundancies. Yes, every redundancy that you create in the system does increase your overall cost, that's a given, but then what alternative do you have? If taking your scenario forward, I completely have a situation where I am only reliant on one of each type of supplier of my top 10, and effectively the top 10 do not have validated alternative suppliers already hooked onto my system. And we take a situation where, my supplier has a problem like Suraj's, that tomorrow some guy has come, factories inspector, and he sealed his building. I'm out. I can't have one of my top 10 suppliers without having a redundancy built in. Yes, the redundancy initially has a cost. I may have to give a more cost or more raw material prices to the new guy, but I at least need to have it validated before the manure hits the fan. So those kinds of things have been done on technical cases by pharma companies. I think they need to now do it on a larger number of input variables, not just for API, for example, or not just for key raw materials, but for across larger number of things. That we have to do scenario building, maybe bring in people from alternative professions and help us with that, like somebody from the army, for example. He does scenario building for us, that okay, tomorrow your security guy is conked out as a violation, or say we take a situation where you have a entire facility problem of one of your guys, or we have a problem that our guy who's a partner for pollution related products, like the guy who picks up the liquid waste and all, he has a problem. How does the company on a real-time basis, without switching off operations or temporarily suspending operations, how can the organization work? And therefore building redundancies and having constant checks for your existing suppliers will have to be done. Yes, it will increase the cost of operations, but I don't see a way out, at least very easily.
No, and Sandeep and Suraj, I think between the two of you, you'll actually summarize the approach on managing third-party compliances. You clearly need to take care of your top suppliers, make sure they are aligned to the compliance regime, and you don't have any risks emerging like business continuity or a reputation risk or it tying back to you. I mean, in certain cases, the ecosystem is known, so it evidently ties back to you. But more importantly, how do you sensitize them? Because clearly they are downstream. They would also have their production pressures, pricing pressures, but compliance is something that is non-negotiable. You cannot have a tolerance to non-compliance. So I think a partnership approach sums it up all. I mean, they have to be a part of your overall compliance program design. And when we work with a lot of our clients, one of the things that we do is when you create your compliance design, make sure you have third-party compliances as a part of the design, and you kind of roll it out on a partner approach. Again, interesting subject. We can keep talking about it, but I'm watchful of the time. Let's take a couple of questions, and then maybe we could request you for closing comments before we call it a wrap. I'm requesting my colleague Disha. She is monitoring the Q&A panel to read out the questions for us. And maybe both of you could answer, or Disha could point it out for whom the question is. Over to you, Disha.
Thank you so much, JD. And thank you so much, panel, for your practical insights on our pharma sector compliances. I would be pleased to put forward certain questions that our webinar family has asked us in the Q&A panel. The first question is for Mr. Suraj Singh. What are the challenges that Indian pharma companies face with regards to US FDA compliances?
I think it is a very technical question, Nadisha. I think, what are the challenges is, I think, is something which every Indian company wants to become approved or, get into the US FDA, because that opens up a lot of opportunities. And it is interesting to note that, the maximum number of US FDA approved plants outside US are in India. That itself shows that, Indian companies are vying with each other to, be approved by US FDA. The challenges that they would face in this regard is, I think, basically relating to the quality. Quality has been a bane for Indian pharma industry. We kind of indirectly touched upon this. Somehow we think that, meeting the price is more important than actually meeting the quality requirements. And that's one reason why, Indian industry as such has this kind of a reputation. We definitely take advantage of the labor arbitrage or low cost of manufacture. But when it comes to quality, I think we are lagging behind. Even if I look at the regulatory landscape, DPCO or NLEM, they only talk about the pricing. They keep on asking the companies to reduce the prices. In fact, it has become so draconian that, it becomes impossible for any multinational to, sell at that kind of a price.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, and I see that, a lot of even Indian companies, for that matter, their share of export market is more than Indian market. India kind of is, becoming a very, laggard as far as the market viability is concerned. So US FDA getting that is I think would be a major quality challenge, and that is what we need to overcome.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I think the next question is for our moderator, JD, which is asked by Mr. Vivek Bhagat. Whether you feel enough has been done in the field of speak open culture from the industry point of view, and the government from the developing nations to provide safety to whistleblower. What can an organization do to set the tone for whistleblowing?
Thank you, Disha. So, I mean, I can talk about it from our ecosystem perspective and what we see our clients follow in the ecosystem. When you go on for a culture of compliance, that includes encouraging people to kind of step up and report if they don't find anything is in order. And it's usually the smallest of the matters that lead to a kind of a snowballing effect. Something like not following the standard operating procedures or cutting corners. I mean, those are the kind of innocuous things that happen in an organization, and then eventually they kind of blow up. Again, I think our panelists and colleagues, Sandeep and Suraj, spoke a lot about culture. I think the culture of whistleblowing actually emerges from encouragement from the top. Of course, you need to have the right tools and mechanisms, have the anonymous portals, have the helplines and the hotlines, but those are mechanics for it. But at the heart of it, the organization should have a very clear policy that there will be no retaliation, there will be anonymity maintained, and people encourage that. In fact, the more openly they talk about what came through and what actions were taken will encourage the next set of people to report. And it's kind of a balancing mechanism within an organization when people know that there is awareness and consciousness amongst the peer group. Someone who is tempted to do the wrong thing will automatically stop and be kind of warned that, hey, don't do this, otherwise it will be reported back. But since this question is more of a practical guidance, I'm going to request Sandeep and Suraj also to add to this very quickly, because we can give some practical tips on how this could be handled within an organization.
So, Jaideep, I think we touched upon it earlier that it will have to be a continuous repetition that compliance is a part of our culture from the top down, and maybe over period when this gets into the thought process and day-to-day behavior of people down the line, then only it can happen. How exactly do companies do it? I think that depends upon the availability of resources, availability of time, availability of and the will to do it. You can go for automated presentations. You can go for human-based interaction for plant-level people, etc. Those kinds of resources are available, and that kind of information is available. I'm not really sure if that's the point of this session today, but I think it starts from the top, and the word I want to keep on repeating is continuous repetition over a period of time.
I kind of echo what Sandeep says, and this is something which we need to keep in mind. I was talking about this buzzword, psychological safety. Everybody is actually talking about it. I think there is a big opportunity, whether a person or an employee can say that his manager is wrong. Okay, whether, something which he has done has gone wrong, whether he can openly come up without actually, his appraisal getting affected next year. If that kind of openness is built, we actually talk about unbossed leadership. If you can actually have that kind of a culture built into it, I think you will see more of employees, even going for those hotlines and, exploring all kinds of mechanisms which, Jaideep, you were talking about. That would definitely improve this culture.
Thank you. Back to you, Disha.
Thank you so much, sir. There's a quick question again from Mr. Arun Kulkarni. He has asked both of our panelists that Africa is a major market. The culture there is really different. What are the major challenges that are faced by the industry in Africa?
Sandeep, you want to take it? I know you. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the challenges in Africa are any different, Suraj. You and I have both seen that in our previous days. The challenges remain the same, that you start at the plant level, you look at plant-related compliance issues, you look at your front-end marketing issues with your African partner. Besides that, at least to the top of my mind, I am not aware of any separate or a unique African challenge. Maybe if you have something to add, but I don't think there's a specific African challenge.
Yeah, Sandeep, I too recall those experiences in Milan where, we were supplying antiretrovirals, one of the biggest manufacturer and supplier of ARVs to Africa. And there were these questions, when I was in the legal department that came up, for setting up a branch office in Africa. If you look at Africa market, it is very tender driven. Lots of ARVs or any other, medicines are actually bought by the governments there. And then, marketed internally. And I do hear some challenges, which is very similar to India. I think if you look at the corruption index and, in all those Transparency International kind of indexes, we are more or less, on par with African countries. So I think, you do face the same kind of challenges there as well, just the way we face here in India.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it is fairly answered. The last question for our panelist is from Mr. Sanket Jha. It would be great if all the panelists can weigh on this. So he has asked, have the global supply chain issues due to the pandemic have also trickled down in some manner to add compliance burden for your respective companies?
Yeah, it does. Sandeep, if I can go first, and I just want to talk about an example that I have faced.
Yeah, please.
There are some suppliers who try to take some kind of a shelter under this, lockdown norms, and refuse to supply or refuse to meet their timelines. And when you dig deeper, you find that, it is not the COVID that really stopped them, but, it's because they were not really able to actually supply. And so, we had to go to the contracts, the contractual arrangement that we have with these suppliers. And we actually could push back saying that, first of all, the contract does not support you. And secondly, and in a very timely manner, even Supreme Court of India came up with these observations that you cannot really take shelter under these kind of, force majeure clauses by quoting, COVID, unless, the COVID per se has stopped you from, fulfilling your obligations. So yes, the supply chain challenges have kind of increased. I can also give you, we do have certain, labs and facilities, which we continue to run even during the lockdown, because all these lockdown norms did give exemption to the pharma sector, because and also under some essential services. We continue to function, operate these facilities, and we faced a huge challenge when it comes to, suppliers and other vendors, transporting goods and other services to our facilities. We had to write to the government. We had to kind of get these special passes for transporting goods and other services. So we did face quite a bit of challenge during this, COVID period.
Thank you so much. One more thing, I'm really delighted to announce that Legacies has released 2 thought papers for our today's topic. The topic being 1, the building a compliance management program, and 2nd, building an effective culture on compliance. So both of the thought papers for legacies will be available to everybody on our webpage. I would request everybody to please go and check it out. Now I really hand over to Dipti and for the word of thanks. But before that, I would really like to hear some kind words from our moderator, Mr. Jaideep Keval Ramani. Over to you, sir.
Disha, thank you so much. No kind words. I just wanted to invite Suraj and Sandeep for the closing comments before we hand it back to Dipti. Sandeep, closing comments, please.
So again, closing comments, only one. I'll again borrow. If you think compliance is expensive, try the risk of non-compliance. Keep that sentence pasted across your critical functions, across your offices, not just big inspiring posters, because the day you get a sudden closure notice from your local PCB officer, trust me, it's not a very nice day and leads to very bad nights. So those are my closing thoughts.
Thank you, Sandeep. Suraj?
Actually, I echo whatever Sandeep says, either you comply or you kind of, you exit, from business. Either you, comply with the ethics or you evaporate. That would be my, closing comment.
Thank you so much, Suraj and Sandeep. It's been a very thought-provoking discussion. Clearly, the subject is so juicy that we need to spend some more time. Maybe we can take some questions offline. Thank you again for your time this evening. Thank you to all the participants. Back to you, Dipti.
Thank you, JD, and thank you so much to our panelists for being here today and for sharing so much wisdom. And I think definitely anybody who's been here has learned a lot, and let's hopefully they'll put it into practice. And with this, we have come to the end of our seminar. I hope everybody has enjoyed this and we have served the purpose and our goal of throwing some light on compliance and pushing towards the growth of the pharma sector. With this, I'd like to sign off. Thank you everybody for taking out your valuable time and joining us today. Wishing you all great health and success. And please keep smiling, keep going, keep safe. Thank you so much. Good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.